Welcome back to the deep dive. We're jumping straight into the source material you shared, pulling out the crucial insights you need fast. Today we're doing a deep dive based on a guide you sent over. It's all about opportunities in the UK distressed asset market, specifically looking at high margin resale. So our mission here, pretty simple really. We're going to unpack this guide, grab the essential knowledge, sort of map out the landscape, and importantly, pinpoint some actionable strategies for sourcing and then reselling physical goods here in the UK, goods that are being sold under, well, pressure. Think of this as your shortcut to getting a real handle on this, potentially a very lucrative but often overlooked niche.
Yeah, it's definitely a market shaped by circumstance, isn't it? I mean, at its heart, distressed assets are just things being sold because the owner has to sell them, and usually quickly.
Right. The guide itself puts it pretty simply. Physical goods, sometimes properties, sold below their typical market value. And the reason...
But we're duress.
Exactly. Financial strain, maybe illegal obligations, or sometimes just a really urgent need to clear out inventory or space. And understanding that why the drivers behind the sale, that seems fundamental.
It really is, because those pressures, well, that's what creates the potential for undervaluation. That's the core opportunity.
Okay, and the guide, it breaks down the different types of these assets based on where they're coming from.
It does. It highlights four main origins, really distinct ones. First up, you've got bailiff or court-ordered seizures.
Right, so this is when, say, bailiffs are legally taking possessions to cover outstanding debts.
Precisely. Like distress for rent is a common one mentioned. Bailiffs tend to target items they think they can sell fairly easily, fairly quickly. So you're looking at things like vehicles, electronics, computers, game consoles, TVs, jewelry, maybe furniture. And for businesses that owe money, it could be office furniture, machinery, company vehicles, general stock they hold.
Hang on, they can't just seize anything, can they? The guide flags up some important exemptions.
Oh, absolutely crucial point, yes. There's a list of goods that are legally protected. We're talking items essential for basic living, think cookers, fridges, beds, medical equipment. Also things that actually belong to someone else, a third party, or items still under finance, like a hire purchase agreement, or fixtures, things permanently fitted to the property. And importantly, tools or equipment needed for someone's job or study those are exempt up to a value of, I think it's £350 currently.
Okay, and knowing those exemptions.
Yeah.
Why is that so vital for someone looking to buy?
Because it tells you what you definitely won't find in these specific sales. It helps manage expectations and focus your search. Right. The second big category the guide talks about is government asset forfeiture. This is stuff coming from the police, HMRC, Border Force, and details sales under POCA, the Proceeds of Crime Act. So assets linked to criminal activity that gets seized.
Ah, okay. Is this where you might see, flashy cars or seized cash being sold off?
Yes, exactly that kind of thing. The guide lists cash, property, luxury items, gems, watches, art, even gambling chips if they're over $1,000. And these assets, they can be held for up to 2 years sometimes. Forfeiture can happen through civil recovery too, which, well, it has a lower burden of proof, basically showing it's more likely than not they were obtained illegally. Then you've got HMRC and Border Force seizures. These often fall under the Customs Act from 1979, usually linked to smuggling, illegal imports, that sort of thing. And the original owners, they have a really tight window to try and get them back. Just 1 month for a legal challenge, 45 days for what's called a restoration request.
So not much time at all.
No. And some things are just never returned. The guide is clear. Alcohol, tobacco, illegal drugs, weapons, and vehicles used for commercial smuggling, they're gone for good. Okay, third category, company liquidation sales. This happens when a business goes under, becomes insolvent, can't pay its debts. So insolvency practitioners, IPs, get appointed. Their job is to sell off the company's assets to repay the creditors as much as possible.
Right, so this could be literally anything the company owned. Office chairs, unsold stock.
It's incredibly varied, yeah. Depends entirely on the business. You might find plant and machinery, office IT gear, company vehicles, and importantly for resale, unsold retail inventory. Now this is key. That inventory can range from brand new, perfect stock, maybe overstock, to customer returns. And the guide specifically notes these returns might be slightly used, maybe have minor defects. Understanding that spectrum of condition is vital here.
Okay, condition is a big variable then. Yep. And the fourth area?
Government surplus. This is simply assets that public bodies think the MADI, local councils, universities, the NHS just don't need anymore.
Like old army trucks or maybe lab gear from a university?
Exactly that. The MOD, often through their Defense Equipment Sales Authority, or DESA, sells off vehicles, aircraft parts, medical supplies, clothing, even land sometimes. councils. They sell surplus land, buildings, maybe old fleet vehicles, contents from closed libraries or leisure centers. It can be quite diverse. Universities might sell specialist lab equipment, old IT hardware, office furniture. The NHS, often it's property via NHS Property Services, or medical equipment and consumables through specialist medical auctioneers.
Okay, quite a range of sources then.
Ah.
So those are the different origins. But what is it about these assets sort of universally that makes them an opportunity? The guide points to some key characteristics.
Yeah, these characteristics really define the whole market's potential, I think. The first one is rapid disposal. The sellers are almost always under immense pressure. It's often described as a fire sale, like you said.
Yeah.
Whether it's debt, a legal requirement, or just needing to clear space now, they prioritize selling quickly over squeezing every last penny of value out. And that leads straight into the second characteristic, undervaluation.
Because speed beats price.
Precisely. Speed is prioritized over maximizing the price. Plus, sometimes the asset's condition or its legal baggage means it gets marked down significantly. Sold well below its true market value. That difference, that gap, that's where the buyer's potential profit margin lies. Then the third one, and this is absolutely critical, sold as seen.
Ah, yes. The big one.
Huge, especially in auctions. This is standard. You are buying the item exactly as it stands, warts and all. No warranties, no guarantees from the seller.
So all the risk regarding its condition, functionality, whatever,
Yeah.
it lands squarely on the buyer.
100%. The guide really hammers this home. It means the responsibility is entirely on you as the buyer to do your homework, your due diligence. Inspect the item thoroughly, assess its condition before you bid or commit to buying.
And it directly hits your real profit margin, right?
Yeah.
Because you have to account for fixing it up.
Exactly. Any costs for inspection, cleaning, repairs, refurbishment, you have to factor those into your calculation to know if the deal actually makes sense financially. You know, a key insight from the guide here is how the legal origin we talked about earlier gives you vital clues.
How so?
Well, knowing if it's from a debt seizure or criminal forfeiture or a company folding or just public surplus, it tells you a lot. It gives you hints about the likely type of inventory you'll find, the potential risks involved, maybe provenance questions with forfeiture items, for instance, and often the speed of the disposal process.
Well, it's not just that it's distressed, it's understanding the specific flavor of distress, as it were.
Yes, exactly that, and how that flavor dictates the terms and the nature of the goods. This whole dynamic means the buyer's real skill isn't just spotting a low price tag. It's about being able to quickly, accurately assess an asset's true potential value, while also understanding the potential hidden costs or risks. Like, is it damaged? Could its history be problematic? And then realistically estimating those remediation costs to make it resellable.
Makes sense.
And it's worth remembering, too, this market isn't just about financial distress. It's actually a pretty efficient way of redistributing assets that might otherwise just sit there, unused. Sometimes it even serves a wider public benefit.
That redistribution angle is interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, let's dive into the appeal more. Why is this market potentially so attractive for, say, smaller businesses looking for those higher margins, maybe compared to just buying from traditional wholesalers?
Well, the absolute fundamental appeal, and the guide highlights this strongly, is those deep discounts. That's what leads directly to the potential for higher profit margins. The low acquisition cost is really the engine driving it. The guide even mentions potential returns being potentially 2 or more percentage points higher in these kinds of rapid sales compared to more typical deals.
Okay, so the margin potential is the big hook. What else?
There's also generally a low barrier to entry. Traditional wholesale, as you know, often involves high minimum order quantities, big upfront capital investment. But the guide points out that distressed channels can often have lower upfront costs. You can frequently start smaller, maybe acquiring individual items or smaller job lots. That gives a lot more flexibility, especially for smaller buyers or people just starting out.
Right, you don't necessarily need a massive warehouse budget from day one.
Exactly. And the third big advantage is access to unique inventory. You're not always competing on the same standardized products everyone else is selling. You might stumble across specialized government surplus gear or niche stock from a liquidation, or maybe those one-off seized luxury items, things that can really differentiate your business and potentially face less direct competition.
Yeah, finding those unique, hard-to-source items is definitely appealing. Okay, but here's where it gets really interesting for me. Why? Why are these sellers, the IPs, the government law enforcement, letting this stuff go for potentially such low prices? If there's high margin for the buyer, why aren't they capturing more of it?
It really boils down to their very different motivations. Their priorities often lie somewhere other than achieving the absolute maximum commercial resale value for every single item.
Okay, like what?
Well, take insolvency practitioners. For them, it's primarily a legal duty. They have to maximize returns for the creditors of the failed company. But crucially, they need to do it quickly and cleanly. Their statutory duties, the need for rapid asset realization to wind things up, that's the priority. Speed often trumps getting the last few percent of value. Plus, there can be tax benefits sometimes that favor a quick, formal disposal.
Okay, so for IPs, it's speed and legal duty. What about law enforcement?
Police, HMRC, their motivations are rooted in public duty, really. Enforcing laws, confiscating the proceeds of crime, deterring future criminal activity, and honestly, just clearing out limited evidence stores or storage space is a practical driver, too. Yes, the sales generate funds for the public purse, which is good, but their main focus is legal compliance and efficient disposal. They're not set up like commercial retailers trying to maximize profit on each item.
Right, they're not retail operations.
Yeah.
And government bodies selling surplus.
Their motivations are again different. Often it's about achieving best value for the taxpayer, which isn't always the same as the highest possible price. It's also about reducing the ongoing costs of storing and maintaining assets they no longer need, promoting sustainability by encouraging reuse, and freeing up capital to reinvest in public services. Public procurement rules often demand transparency and structure, but again, the ultimate goal isn't usually maximizing retail profit per item. It's more about efficient and accountable public asset management.
Okay, so putting that all together, what does this mixture of motivations mean for you, the buyer, practically speaking?
It means that the seller's pressure, whether it's for speed, compliance, or cost reduction, that pressure is your core advantage. It's what drives the undervaluation. But it's also important to understand, especially with public bodies, that they might have these additional goals beyond just getting cash, like putting funds back into services, hitting sustainability targets, or ensuring that best value principle is met. So in a way, it's a system that kind of benefits both sides by making this efficient asset redistribution happen.
Got it. Now, the guide also touches on macroeconomics. That raises a pretty important question. How does the wider economy, booms and busts, affect this whole market?
Yeah, the guide is very clear about this cyclical pattern. It states that distressed sales naturally become more prevalent during an economic downturn.
Makes intuitive sense. More businesses struggling.
Exactly. It points to the surge seen back in the 2008 financial crisis as an example. And it suggests similar trends might be intensifying or could intensify around now, say, 2024, partly due to things like rising interest rates and what it calls a funding gap in the UK market. So what this means for buyers is you need to be strategic. Keep an eye on those economic indicators, interest rates, insolvency statistics, reports on business funding challenges.
So downturns could actually signal opportunity.
Potentially, yes. Downturns often mean increased supply in the distressed market, more assets becoming available, maybe even greater pressure on sellers leading to steeper discounts. So monitoring those trends helps with strategic timing.
Okay, so we know what these assets are, why they're sold this way, who's selling them. Now, who are the key players actually making these sales happen? Who are the entities you'll typically be dealing with as a buyer?
Well, beyond the primary sellers themselves, the insolvency practitioners, law enforcement agencies, government bodies we've discussed, the absolutely crucial intermediaries very often are the auction houses.
Right, the auctioneers.
Yeah. Auction houses really act as central hubs. They aggregate listings from all of these different diverse sellers. They provide the platform, the structure for the sale, whether that's a traditional live auction or increasingly online bidding. And importantly, because they're usually selling on behalf of these distressed sources, that sold as seen principle we talked about, it's almost universally applied on their platforms. You have to assume that's the case.
Do government bodies ever sell directly?
Sometimes, yes, especially for perhaps very large or unique assets like property or maybe highly specialized equipment. But often the structured environment, the marketing reach, and the efficiency of using an established auction house is preferred, especially for reaching a broad base of potential buyers quickly.
The guide mentioned tailoring your strategy based on the seller's motivation. How does that play out when you're dealing with these auction houses or other players?
It's still fundamental, really. Even if you're bidding via an auctioneer, understanding why the asset is there helps shape your approach. An IP overseeing a liquidation sale, they want speed, certainty, a clean transaction to close the books and pay creditors. Law enforcement, they need to follow strict legal processes, clear storage space efficiently, ensure compliance. government bodies. They're often focused on that best value concept, transparency, maybe even sustainability outcomes. So how you structure your offer, if it's not a straight auction, how quickly you can complete, maybe even highlighting how you plan to reuse or recycle items. These things could potentially make your bid more attractive, depending on who the ultimate seller is and what their priorities are, even if you're dealing via an intermediary.
And you mentioned this earlier. There seems to be a really interesting interplay between the public sector and private companies here.
Yes, that's a really significant dynamic in the UK market. Public bodies, councils, police forces, government departments very frequently use private sector auction houses or specialized online aggregators to handle the disposal of their surplus or seized assets. The guide mentions several names, companies like John Pye, Wilson's Auctions, Ramco UK for Modi stuff, maybe British Medical Auctions for NHS equipment, and also platforms like policeauctions.uk, which aggregates police sales, or general auction portals like iBidder, BidSpotter, William George.
So it's like a strategic partnership.
Exactly. It's a win-win, really. The public sector gets access to the private sector's expertise, their established buyer networks, marketing reach, and efficient sales processes. It helps them meet their disposal goals effectively. And for the private auction companies, they get a consistent, often quite unique stream of assets to sell. So these platforms, these auction houses and aggregators, they become your primary access points as a potential buyer. That's where you'll find a lot of this stock listed.
All right, let's get really practical now. Based on the guide, where specifically do you actually go to find these assets? What are the specific channels and platforms it lists out?
Okay, yeah. The guide provides quite a detailed rundown. For bailiff and court auctions, it mentions traditional auctioneers. GJ Wisdom & Co. is one name that comes up. Sometimes property auctioneers like SDL Property Auctions might handle repossessions too. These are generally open to the public, but they'll definitely require registration, ID, and all that. And critically, they strongly advise viewing beforehand because, again, that sold as seen rule is paramount.
Right. Inspect first.
Yep.
What about the government forfeiture stuff? POCA assets, customs, seizures?
For government forfeiture, those major auctioneers we mentioned are key players. John Pye, Wilson's Auctions. They handle a lot of assets from police forces and various government agencies. Policeauctions.uk is also highlighted as a useful aggregator specifically for police sales, but the guide points out what it calls a fascinating hidden gem.
Oh, go on.
Direct police force shops on platforms like eBay or even Vinted.
Seriously. Police forces selling stuff directly on eBay. That sounds, well, unexpected.
It does, doesn't it? But the guide notes some forces, it mentions Leicestershire, Sussex, Northamptonshire as examples, are actually doing this. They're selling unclaimed lost property or items seized in investigations that are no longer needed or confiscated goods directly to the public online. The potential advantage here: possibly lower overheads for the police force compared to using an auction house, which might translate into deeper discounts for buyers. Often they focus on smaller, unique items, and it's driven by really practical needs like just clearing out storage space and generating some public funds.
So worth keeping an eye on those direct police eBay stores then.
Definitely worth monitoring those directly, yes. Could uncover some real niche finds. Okay, next. Company liquidation stock. The channels here are quite varied. You've got general industrial auctioneers like BPI Options or Edison's. John Pye has a specific insolvency section. Then there are specialists focusing on surplus, overstock, and returns, names like Magpie Ltd, stockseller.co.uk, top-down trading come up. Gem Wholesale is mentioned, often dealing in larger job lots, more B2B focused. And for electronics returns specifically, places like Digiland or Outlet Web are listed. They often sell what are called graded products.
Right, and with liquidation stock, especially returns, that condition variable we talked about really comes into play, doesn't it? Could be anything from perfect to broken.
Absolutely. It's all over the place. That term graded products is key. It means items are explicitly categorized by their condition. Could be as new, maybe minor cosmetic flaws, perhaps missing accessories, or even known functional issues. So you must read the descriptions carefully, understand the grading system used, and, again, factor in the cost and effort of assessing the actual condition and any potential repairs or refurbishment needed. That's crucial to figuring out your real profit potential. Just seeing a low headline price isn't the whole story.
Got it. Assess. What about the government surplus channels? Odd councils, etc.
Yeah, the channels tend to differ depending on the specific public body. For Modi surplus, the guide points towards Ramco UK, govsales.co.uk, and GovPlanet as common outlets. Councils might use auctioneers like NCM Auctions or the centralgov.uk property portal for land and buildings. Sometimes they even use internal reuse platforms first, like Warpit, before selling externally. Universities. You might find specialist platforms like Unigreen Scheme for lab equipment, or they might have their own disposal portals, or use general government surplus sites like GovDeals. And for the NHS, specialist medical equipment often goes through British medical auctions, while property disposals are frequently handled by NHS Property Services.
Okay. And then there are the
What?
big aggregators, the ones pulling listings from multiple sources.
Exactly. Don't forget the general aggregators and the large online auction houses, platforms like iBidder.com, BidSpotter UK, William George. These sites are really useful because they centralize listings from many different sellers and sources: liquidators, bailiffs, government bodies, direct company disposals. Auction Marketer's Calendar is also mentioned as a good way to see upcoming auctions across various platforms. You can find a huge range of assets on these sites, from consumer electronics and clothing right through to heavy industrial machinery.
And safe to assume sold as seen applies pretty much everywhere there, too.
Very safe assumption, yes. Always read the terms and conditions, but expect sold as seen to be the default.
Wow, okay. That's a really comprehensive list of places to start looking. The guide suggests a practical first step, too, doesn't it? Something like choose a few platforms relevant to your niche and just explore.
It does, and that seems like excellent advice. Just getting familiar with the specific platforms that seem most relevant to what you might want to buy. Understanding how they list items, what information they provide, how their bidding process works, what their terms and conditions are, especially around things like buyer's premium, VAT, collection deadlines, and inspection opportunities. That's all essential groundwork before you even think about bidding.
Right. Do your reconnaissance first.
Yeah.
Okay, so pulling all of this together then. Based on the guide's insights, what are the absolute key takeaways, the strategic principles someone needs to grasp if they're serious about looking into this market?
Well, I think the core opportunity, as we've really unpacked, it stems from that combination of factors: rapid disposal pressure on the seller, the resulting potential for undervaluation, and that critical sold as seen nature of the assets. Success seems to hinge on really understanding the diverse motivations of the different sellers. Are they driven by debt recovery, legal mandates, clearing space, achieving best value, sustainability, and then tailoring your approach, your searching, your bidding strategy accordingly. Remember, the market is cyclical, sensitive to wider economic trends, so keep an eye on those. And recognize that the partnership between public bodies and private auctioneers is what creates many of the accessible entry points for buyers like you. And always, always remember that quality and condition vary hugely. Your true cost includes any necessary inspection, repair, or refurbishment work. That's non-negotiable.
Okay, so understanding the landscape.
Yeah.
And the guide actually lays out some strategic principles.
It does. It boils it down to 4 key strategic principles for anyone looking to engage with this market. First, tailored sourcing. Don't just cast a wide net randomly. Match your sourcing efforts, where you look, what you look for, and how you approach sellers or auctions to the specific type of seller and their likely primary motivation. Be targeted. Second, robust due diligence. We've said it a lot, but it bears repeating. Given that sold as seen is pretty much the standard rule, rigorous inspection before you commit is absolutely non-negotiable. You have to accurately assess the condition, identify potential risks or hidden costs to calculate your realistic profit margin. Third, consider a diversified inventory strategy. The guide suggests maybe a hybrid approach makes sense for many. Don't rely solely on the unpredictable nature of distressed asset availability. Maybe combine opportunistic, potentially high-margin acquisitions from these distressed channels with more stable, predictable sourcing from traditional wholesale or retail channels. That helps manage risk and ensures more consistent inventory flow. And fourth, market awareness. Stay informed. Continuously monitor not just the specific auction platforms or channels you're interested in, but also keep an eye on those broader economic trends we discussed. Anticipating shifts in supply, maybe due to economic downturns or specific industry struggles, allows you to be more strategic in timing your buying efforts and potentially spot emerging opportunities before others do.
Tailored sourcing, robust due diligence, diversification, market awareness. Got it. That really wraps up our deep dive into the UK distressed asset market, focusing on that high-margin resale angle. We've covered quite a bit defining what these assets actually are, understanding the forces driving their sale, identifying the key players and the crucial intermediaries, and navigating the specific channels and platforms where you can actually find them. And genuinely, thank you for sending over the source material that prompted this whole exploration. It really provided such a clear and detailed roadmap of this complex niche. We really hope that you, listening, can take these insights, maybe pick a platform or two from that list, and just start exploring the possibilities for yourself. See what's out there. And as the guide leaves us with a final thought.
By proactively embracing these principles that tailored sourcing, the rigorous due diligence, adopting a diversified approach, and maintaining continuous market awareness, you really do position yourself to strategically unlock and capitalize on the significant high margin potential that's embedded within this complex, yes, but also incredibly dynamic UK distressed asset market. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.